Hey everybody. Happy was it Thursday? Yeah, I think it's Thursday today. For those of you who are on, please get those likes up, tag anybody on this discussion who you think may find it interesting. We're gonna talk a little bit about the weight. Um Devon Franklin, Meagan Good. I'm sure all of y'all have heard a little bit about their story. Again, get those likes up and tag anybody on this discussion. So y'all, this has been trending everywhere. It's been trending everywhere. And I had seen a few content creators a few weeks ago who had alluded to the fact that they might be divorcing, but I don't really like to jump really deep into gossip like that, alleged this, alleged that, because it's like you don't ever really know. But if you haven't heard, like it officially came out that they are going to be, divorcing. And the interesting thing about this case is, when they got together, I think it was, a little over 9 years ago. Soon after they got married, they released this book called The Wait. If you're not familiar with The Wait, basically the entire premise behind this book is that, hey, we were celibate during our courtship. We were celibate throughout our entire relationship. This gave us the skills that we needed in order to really get to know one another, in order to really establish a genuine connection and bond. And this is the foundation of a successful, long lasting relationship. And so that was really um, that was the foundation, they said, of the relationship. And like I said, that was pretty much the entire message behind the book, The Wait, which is, if you do it this way, then you're basically going to have, you're going to have some success. And so now here we are, fast forward 9 years later, and for whatever the reason, I guess the wait didn't necessarily lead to a long-term successful relationship. So before I move on, I'm going to go, I want to play a little bit of this video. Y'all, this was a interview they did. I see this posted about let me see, December 25th, 2019. So this was what, like a year or two ago? Because what is it now? Yeah, it's like 2 years ago. But I'm gonna play this clip. I'll just do the audio because it can get a little tricky, with the copyright stuff. So I'm gonna just play the audio where basically him and Meagan Good are going back and forth about their story, their process, and how it essentially, how it kind of led to their supposed success. And then we're gonna get into it. So let me play it really quick.
You, I think, were like the first ones to really out of Hollywood start talking about it. Well, you were. What made you decide to go there? Because you didn't have to tell people what was happening in your bedroom, but you did. Or not happening. Sorry. Eventually happening, but not right away.
Oh, Lord. Right. We had to wait.
Not happening, right.
I think we just wanted to share because relationships are so hard. And truth be told, there's not a lot of guidance out there. And so we wanted to share our truth in that waiting to have sex was a critical part of the healthy foundation of our marriage and relationship. And we both were doing it independently. I had been doing it for years before Meagan and I got together, because, being out in the world, speaking and preaching, telling one thing, there was a time when I was doing something different. And I wanted to reconcile who I was in public and in person and in private, excuse me. So that's why I decided to wait. And I said, you know what? I'm going to wait until marriage after I wasn't waiting. And then Meagan and I got together and found out she had been waiting.
Yeah. And Meagan.
Okay. So y'all, just give y'all the backstory. So basically he's like, he he decided to wait. He decided to be celibate. And then I guess evidently somewhere down the road, Meagan Good decided to be celibate. Now, many of y'all know that her reputation precedes her as being like the party girl, the it girl. Waiting to celibacy was certainly not a part of her, legacy. So, but I guess, when they met, she had been at a point in her life where she was trying to be celibate, whatever. So, that's where we're at. For those of you who are on, please get those likes up. Tag anybody on this discussion who you think may find it interesting. We're talking a little bit about Meagan Good, Devon Franklin, and the wait. Hey girl, hey Chantel. Y'all, I just got off her live. If you have not had a chance, please go and check it out. It was a dope discussion. Dope discussion. That's Danica Marie. Shout out to Danica Marie. But it was a candid conversation, y'all. It was good. So definitely check it out. And we are reviewing a little bit of this interview that Devon Franklin had with Meagan Good, with Tamron Hall? And they're going over their story. So I'm just playing it.
And as I understand it, you've said in the past you knew this was your husband before he knew.
Yeah.
How's that possible?
Well, it's really interesting because we had met 4 years prior to working on Jumping the Broom. And he was the executive on Jumping the Broom. I was the actress on the film. And I was in the tail end of kind of not so great relationship. Not because the person we just weren't right for each other, but I really got a chance to get to know him on set. And I thought, man, that's the kind of guy I wish I could marry. And that was it. He's the guy who gives you the job. That's all I thought about it. And then I got back from Nova Scotia filming, and I was like, man, Lord, I'm at a really hard place, like at a standstill in my life, and I'm really hitting a wall. What am I supposed to be doing? And the first thing that God told me was that it was time to get out of that relationship. The second thing that God told me was that it was time to be celibate. And the third thing that God told me was that Devon was my husband.
Okay, so y'all, real quick before we move forward. So basically, she met dude, and she's like, man, he's a godly man. I wish I could have a godly man like him. And then she basically was like, but I don't qualify, basically. Now, that's an honest assessment. We actually touched upon this earlier in Chantel Simone's podcast. Like I said, definitely check it out. But, I could appreciate her being honest, at least at that very moment in time, and being like, this is where he's at. I'm not about that life. So he's kind of beyond my level when it comes to that. So, she was honest there. We're going to continue.
And I was like, okay. And I was like, and I didn't know him that well. And I was like, so what do I do, Lord? And God was just like, nothing. Just work on yourself. So I spent the next 9 months healing, working on damage from childhood, growing up in the business, things you just go through in life. And about 5 months in, I started telling friends and family that Devon was my husband. They were like, oh, really? They're like, does he know that? And I'm like, no. They're like,
so you had not even gone on a date?
No.
Didn't know him.
Okay, so then she started questioning on him super hard and starts claiming him as the husband. Now, here's the thing, y'all. I say this as a woman of faith. I think God really does communicate with us. He can talk to us. I know one couple in particular right now who's still married and has a few kids, where he was like, God showed him, this is my wife. And for some crazy reason, he went and told her, and she actually believed him. And, they've been married now for a long time. I don't remember the exact time, but they've been married now for some time, and they have kids. So that can happen. But I've also seen it go really south, of people claiming all kinds of people. And she's like, oh, well, that's my husband or that's my wife. And they're like, no, you're not. Like, God didn't show me that. So that can get kind of creepy really fast. Especially when you start claiming people like you are, their property. But I'm not saying that's what she's doing, but like I will honestly say I have seen that go both ways. But I will say this, y'all. I will say this. God's words, they do not fail. God does not fail. He don't fail. Now, man does. People make mistakes, you know what I mean? But it's like, you can't say, oh, God told me to do this, God told me to do that, and then get a bad result. and then be mad at God. Because it's like, if God actually tells you to do something and you execute that plan, then it's like God doesn't, like I said, he doesn't fail. He doesn't produce, he doesn't lead to failure. So I even try to be mindful of this myself when I'm just like, oh, I feel inspired to do something, or feel like, okay, maybe I should do this. Like, there's a clear difference between me wanting to do something versus like God in heaven being like, oh, this is the way. And like I said, if that's the case, what if that's the case and this perfect God is telling you to do something, it's not going to lead to no brokenness. It's not going to lead to failure. So I always question when somebody, I guess, is quick to say God told me to do this, especially if the end result of that is, you know, failure. It's just like some don't work, some don't look right. But we'll continue. Yeah, God does not fail people to do right. He said, God told me are the common words of spiritually mature people. So yeah, and like I said, that's not to say I understand people trying to understand and hear God's voice for themselves. I think that's really important. But we're just gonna continue to listen. I'm gonna say that.
Anything about
I didn't talk to him.
This could have gone real creepy.
Yeah.
That does sound a little creepy, but they got married.
I don't know her.
What you talking about? Yeah, no, I was just at the time I was an executive for Sony working on the movie, and she was one of the stars. So I was like, hey, you know what? That's the talent. I'm the executive. Like, I would never cross that line. And also, it's Meagan Good. So I'm thinking like, yo, like that's just, Meagan Good, the stars, the moon, they're all in another stratosphere. And so when it came to reality that, like, wait a minute, at the Jump in the Broom premiere, 9 months after the movie was done, we started talking, and it felt like, wait, I think Meagan is interested in me.
Meanwhile, I had told all my girlfriends I was like, meet my husband tonight, and everyone's like, okay, so we're following him around the party like teenage schoolgirls. We're like looking at him and stuff, and then we went out 2 weeks later, and then literally from the time of going out, it was 10 months later we were engaged, and 2 months later we were married.
So over the span of 13 months, you were celibate in the relationship. You make this pledge to each other, you make it to God, but we're all humans and our bodies react to things. Absolutely. So did you?
Okay, so basically she was spying. Well, I don't say spying on him, but like she claimed him. So she talks about in the party, she went around. The girlfriends are trying to scope him out, and so yeah, it sounds like, just based on what they're explaining, she was feeling him way before he understood. And I bet you he was probably flattered. He's probably like, man, like Meagan Good is feeling me. Like, really? There's probably a side of him that was flattered. Who knows? But okay, this clip is almost done, y'all. I think I got like a few more minutes. Yeah, I think I got like 2 more minutes. No, another minute.
Avoid kissing? Did you? A massage was out of order? I mean, because these things, I'm just being honest. Okay,
come on, Tamara.
I mean, you know my husband.
Yes, I do.
Right, my husband like massaged my shirt. I'm like, hey, maybe not as often because we have a baby now, but hey, But it's like, how did you avoid triggers?
It's one of the things we talk about, in the book. We talk about the power of delayed gratification.
The power.
We live in a time where everybody wants everything now. But there's a lot of value when we just wait and sit back and say, you know what, I'm going to delay this, because if I do, I'll get what I actually want when it's time for it. So for us, we had to know our triggers. Now, that means some nights we could not Netflix and chill, okay? We couldn't do it.
Did you cuddle? You didn't stay in the same house?
Every day was different. No, we had separate houses. We didn't move in until...
and you didn't have any sleepovers?
No, we had sleepovers. Oh, yeah. But again, you got to know your boundaries. You got to know your triggers.
So pillow in the middle?
Sometimes.
Really?
It just depends. It just depends. Like, depends on how strong you felt on that day. So some days I'd be weak, she'd be strong. Some days she'd be weak, I'd be strong. So it was both of us wanting the same thing, but being okay to let moment by moment dictate what we did in those moments.
Okay, so y'all hadn't heard, that was a little clip. You listen at it, it sounds really cute. It sounds like, man, like couples goals. How many of y'all out here, if you weren't one who was thinking couples goals, you at least seen somebody or know somebody who was thinking couples goals? Like, in that, from face value, it sounds really great. I mean, she was waiting, he waited. God told her, "You're my husband." God gave her the vision. Then he eventually got the vision. They held hands. I mean, I think I read one, because I actually read their book, The Wait. I didn't finish it. I read like half of it, right? Because I wanted to like see what it was about. And in part of the book, they're talking about, the first time they hold hands, it was like electrical shots went through their body, and like the passion and the fireworks and the spirit, showed up. So it's just this really like really flowery Hollywood like kind of situation, right? Which they are from Hollywood, so that's not surprising. But then I'm like, how does this go from this to now they're filing for a divorce. Like I'm so confused. Now here's the thing. Here's the thing I want to say about it. As a person who actually was celibate before I got married, and very much understand and believe that that is the best way to go, for women of God. Just because you decide to be celibate does not necessarily mean that you are, you know, gonna be a good match for one another. Does not mean that you are actually prepared to be a wife. It does not. Celibate that's just one aspect of it, and I think in some ways that can maybe keep your mind clear, because sometimes when people, especially toxic people or addictive personalities, whatever, if you sexualize behavior, you sexualize relationships so early on, sometimes women they're not even able to kind of look at the red flags or look at what could potentially be a problem because they're in the high. So that's what I'm saying. I think when you remove that physical aspect of it, it can cause it to be a little bit more logical about things. But that does not mean that you are prepared still to actually be a wife or prepared to actually maintain a marriage long term. Um, and so I think so often I see this used, women who have been really promiscuous and then they choose to be celibate because honestly they figure out that being promiscuous just was not leading to anything, because it's not meant to. Promiscuity has downsides. But they basically, they they thought it up, right? They ride the cock carousel for however long, and then they hit a certain age and they're like, this doesn't work for me, I'm gonna be celibate. But but my question is, did you deal with all of the trauma, all of the garbage, the soul ties, the spiritual brokenness that you got while you was going through those different situations? Because that's the thing. That's just, celibacy is just one aspect, but there still has to be the transformation internally. Your heart, your spirit, your mind, all of that has to be prepared and dealt with. And I am leery of anybody that thinks that celibacy alone is just going to be the answer. It absolutely is not. And, we see a prime example here of a pastor and his, I think, soon to be ex wife who were celibate, and God told him this and God told him that. And now they're ending in divorce. And like I said, I don't even know the full details. We can only speculate, but God don't fail. I'll say that much. So it's like, God ain't gonna tell you to do something and then lead to something that he hates. God hates divorce. God hates divorce. And I will say this. Biblically speaking, there are very, very few reasons for a couple to be divorced. I think the really only reason from what I remember is premarital, not premarital, like extramarital affairs. Like if a person goes and sleeps with somebody else. And then some would even argue like if there's like physical abuse or violence, things like that. Like those are the reasons where it's like, yeah, okay, we really need to work this out. But that irreconcilable differences, oh well, we just kind of grew apart. None of those are valid reasons for divorce. So I just want to just lay that foundation before we get into a little bit more. So there was they released an official statement. I think it was a later on. Let me see if I can find it. Also, for those of you please get those likes up. I want to see at least 50 likes. Y'all, and if you want to show some support to the show, you can find me on Cash App or Venmo, Shay Shar Day. I appreciate all of you guys who were able to show some support, however big or small. We are talking about this whole situation, the weight gone wrong. What went wrong, y'all? The whole book, the whole weight, y'all, that was a thing. Like they had conferences on it. I remember like women talking about it, and like they were pushing that thing like that was the answer. That was the answer and the remedy to a long lasting successful relationship. It lasted about 9 years, but now it's ending. So evidently the weight didn't work. Why, y'all? Why is that? We can only speculate, but I want to touch upon these things. So I'm gonna bring up this article that I just seen recently. This is from because you got CNN reporting on this, y'all. Bring this up right here. Bring this up right here. Okay, so we're gonna go over this one real quick. This is CNN. They just kind of Talked about it. They talked about it. So it says Meagan Good and Devon Franklin, who co-authored a relationship book, are ending their marriage. The two announced the news on social media. And it reads, after much prayer and consideration, we have decided to go in our future separately, but forever connected. Their post began. Okay, so like I said, here's the thing about it. Biblically speaking, biblically speaking, divorce is not really an option. Apart from apart from extramarital affairs, that's not really an option. So that's not really anything you pray about. It's kind of like if this is what you abide by, and I say this because I know they both claim to be Christians. He is a pastor. So he more than anyone else knows this is not really like an option. This is not like okay, is this God's will or is this not God's will? It's like, no, God hates divorce. Like he talks about that. So again, I'm saying this is just based upon what the Bible itself says. And again, they are Christians, I think, who say to abide by that. So just saying that, just leaving that out there. So again, it says, after much prayer and consideration, we have decided to go into our future separately but forever connected. We celebrate almost a decade of marriage together and a love that is eternal. There is no one at fault. We believe this is the next chapter in the evolution of our love. Their statement continued. Okay, so y'all, I ain't gonna sit there and lie to nobody. I am confused. If your love is eternal and nobody's at fault, then why get a divorce? Especially when God hates divorce. And again, I'm saying this for those who claim to be Christian, those who claim to believe in in the wisdom text, whatever. It's pretty clear that divorce is not something that should be used as a really, freely. It's not like, oh, okay, we dated for 6 months and we broke up. Like no, divorce is a whole different thing. So I guess I'm confused because it's like, if you're saying that the love is so good and eternal, then what? Why are you divorcing? Okay, it says, we are incredibly grateful for the life-changing years we've spent together as husband and wife. We are also extremely thankful to God for the testimony being created inside of us both and for blessing our lives with each other. Their followers expressed shock, especially given that Franklin, who is a Hollywood producer, posted praise for Good and her role in the new Amazon series Harlem on December 2nd. I'm so proud of my love, Meagan Good. The caption on the Instagram post reads, she's one of the most talented actors on the planet, and she's funnier than you may know, but I'm so glad you finally get a chance to see her do it all as Camille Parks in the new Amazon show Harlem. Okay. The pair documented their Christian romance and courtship in the 2015 book, The Wait, a powerful practice for finding the love of your life and the life you love. Y'all, okay. So that's one of their official statements. They actually both released the same Instagram post of them sitting next to each other, really flowery. It's basically like no one's at fault. We decided that the next chapter in the evolution of our love is to divorce. Now, again, like I said, from a strictly biblical standpoint, that's just that's nothing you pray about unless there's like something, like I said, some crazy fear. And even then, as a pastor, you know what I mean? Some would argue, even as a pastor, okay, why not show forgiveness towards your wife? But even besides that, like I said, that is the only reason. Now, some sources say that it was, they kind of grew apart. Work, I think this is another, I don't know if it was People magazine were saying that, work, something like that. Again, from a biblical standpoint, that work is not a reason you divorce a person. I got busy with career, they got busy with the career. That's not a reason you divorce a person. So obviously, we don't know the full story. That's obvious. The PR people are making it look really cute. I mean, this entire relationship is cute from the beginning, even the end, even the way that they're breaking up is unified. They're holding hands. She's holding hands. We still show an eternal love. We're still friends. We're still happy together. We're just not going to stay together. So we already know we're not getting the full story, y'all. We already know we're not getting the full story. Now, here's another confusing thing to me, y'all. This is another confusing thing. I know he's a pastor. I think Seventh-day Adventist, but he's a pastor. And Harlem, from what I have seen, I haven't even watched it, but I just read through some of the different descriptions. I've seen some of the different trailers. There is nothing about that is reflective of actually trying to be even remotely godly. And the character that she plays, as many as I know, she plays a character who's who's fornicating, and in one scene is doing some pretty illicit sexual acts. I'll leave it at that. So it's curious to me that very interesting to me that, as a pastor, he would congratulate his soon-to-be ex-wife for playing a woman in a role who, by all sense and purposes, is living in sin, right? Or by all sense and purposes, is living against the kind of life that he proclaims to be about. I don't understand that. I just really do not understand that at all. So, like I said, there's a lot of different holes in this thing, a lot of things that don't make sense, a lot of things that do not add up. They just do not add up. And, it's sad because, like I said, he's a pastor. She's supposed to be first lady. They wrote this whole Christian love story courtship and how the wait is supposed to give you your lasting love. And here they are not even able to last. So what does this mean? Y'all, what does this mean? I think a couple of things. The whole flowery Instagram couple, perfect couple goals, it does not exist. There is no such a thing as a perfect couple. It just strictly does not exist. It just doesn't. It is so, to me, very sad that as a pastor, as somebody who claims to be a leader, that this is the reflection, or this is the how do I put it? Like, this is a legacy that they're leaving. That's just me personally. At the end of the day, he has to stand before God, and that's between him and the Lord. Same with hers, between him and the Lord. But I'm just saying, as far as standards, as far as anybody who claims to be a person of God or a Christian person, we're held accountable. We are held accountable. Now, if you have been divorced, you know what I mean, or even going through divorce, that doesn't mean like, and you're a Christian, or you claim to be a godly person, it doesn't mean that like all hope is lost and automatically, just horrible. But what I am saying is, somebody who really is desiring to live the gospel, right, or is desiring to be a Christian or godly, as as they proclaim to be, there are actual standards. There are actual standards, and there are actually things that we are supposed to reflect. And if we, as Christian or Christ followers, as godly people, spiritual, however you want to term it, if we are doing the exact same thing as everybody else, the exact same thing, then how are we supposed to be any different? How are we supposed to be any different? And like I said, this whole kind of cute couples goals thing, it quickly dissolved. And, without me even knowing the details, all we know is that something in there was off. Something in there just was right. And that's not to say, who knows, maybe early on they really did hear from God, or they really did, have a genuine connection. And then somewhere down the line, just people lose focus. And that leads me to another point. You have to actually work out your relationship with God consistently. Just because you maybe had one time or one season where you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on God for these 2 months, and you maybe experience some positive change. If you don't maintain that, and if you don't maintain that connection with God and abiding by those principles, those spiritual principles, then you can easily get off track. And there's people I know who, they'll be in here one day, they're like, okay, I'm this. And then they kind of lose track of it. And then their life goes totally distant. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, for all we know, they could have heard from God earlier on, or they could not have. But what we do know is somewhere in there, just based upon the evidence, something went off. It's plain as day, especially as people who are open about their walk with God, open as Christians. They will be held accountable. They will be held accountable. I will be held accountable. I don't have nearly as much as a platform for them. And I know I will be held accountable for every single thing that I do. And I take that seriously. And I ask God every single day to keep me. I am not perfect, but I know that comes with a level of responsibility. So we should not be throwing around things, I think, and blaming God for our own mistakes, or for our own, for our own issues. Because like I said, God don't fail. He does not fail. So anyways, for those of you who are on, please get those likes up. Tag anybody on this discussion who you think may find it interesting. And here's another thing, y'all. So this whole topic of, turning a hoe into a housewife, or a 304 into a, into a housewife. Now, here's the thing. We already know that she was known as a party girl. She was throwing it up for some time, playing those roles. That's not to say that Meagan Good didn't have a change of heart. That's not to say that she didn't really genuinely try to do different. We don't know. But I will say in general, this is one of the reasons I think promiscuity is so detrimental because um, when you have that track record, when you've done certain things, when you've been in certain things, been in certain ways, it can be really hard to change those. It can be hard to change those ways. And now, like I said, I don't know anything. I don't know about the details of her marriage, but unfortunately, the roles that she's playing, prime example, the Amazon, it's like that's kind of reflecting the same old kind of role she was doing beforehand, which is a very modern, kind of sexually out there, loose, free girl. And like I said, those mindsets they just don't easily just go away. It has to be you have to actually go through go through some things. God actually has to change your heart. There has to be genuine change. So that's what I'm saying. Just because somebody plays a prayer or decides to be celibate, if you haven't dealt with that way of thinking, if you haven't dealt with your old habits, you haven't dealt with whether it's a party girl mentality, a modern girl mentality, used to being sexually free, used to having your own freedom, to a certain extent, used to just doing whatever you want. If you haven't dealt with that and you bring that like single girl mindset into a marriage and expect that it's going to sustain a marriage, that is a recipe for disaster because you cannot act the same way as a single woman as you do when you're married. There has to be some change. There has to be some compromise. And there's also a way that you should honor and respect your husband, period. And again, we don't really know specifically how she acted. We just know what we've seen, which in many instances has been either, oh, everything is so cute, or different instances where he has actually tried to defend her. But the image, what I do not like and question is the image, right? The image of, okay, I can kind of do this whole thought thing this whole life, and then I'm gonna pray to God, right? And then now God's gonna send me like a pastor, like a man of God who's been walking with him for however many years. And more often than not, that doesn't work. Maybe that worked for her because she's Meagan Good and she's beautiful and she was an it girl. And how many men desired her and lusted after her for years? Devon Franklin could have been one of them. So she just happens to be, you know, one of the most beautiful women in the world. So she maybe has the luxury of doing that, but most women do not. And like I said, although she could land a really high value man or a good looking man, all that kind of different stuff, still, like I said, that mindset. And while I can't say that was necessarily what broke them up, we don't know. There's a lot of holes in the story. What I can say is that the simple idea that it's really easy to transition from, being a party girl, and then you're just going to automatically go and know how to be a wife and be satisfied in being a wife and be satisfied with not having maybe that level of validation you had before, maybe not being that it girl, maybe not having all these men fawn over you. You know what I mean? You're not putting yourself in positions where that would happen. Are you okay with that? How many modern women, right? How many modern women can honestly say that they are used to getting all that male attention and validation and maybe DMs and cat calls and they're used to that. And then now they marry a man and they can be wholly devoted to that one man and be okay not having that extra validation. How many women could say that? So a special shout out to I see the super chat coming through for the JD. Is that Caudle? I hope I say that right. I'm a pastor. I would bet my paycheck that I could tell you exactly what's going through Devon's mind. Okay. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like we could only speculate. We don't know. There's just a lot. There's a lot of holes. There are a lot of holes in that story. So, good PR. They definitely have a good PR because from the start even to the finish, everything looks really, really, really cute. But my bigger point is that living as a modern woman and choosing everything that goes along with that, specifically the sexual promiscuity, the party girl lifestyle, the hoish lifestyle, all that kind of stuff, it's hard sometimes for those women to transition. I listened to she did an interview not too long ago where she talked about for some time she was trying to figure out whether or not she even wanted to have kids. And Devon Franklin, he was kind enough to give her that space to do so. But most men, or there's many men out there who that would be hard for them. She's like, I think 40. So I think she just maybe figured out in the last year or two that, okay, maybe I want to have kids, but he had to wait all those years for her to decide that she wanted to have kids. You know what I mean? And that's just little things like that, like kids. She had this pretty well-known career before they got married, and he chose to marry her. But she's still, she's still done roles. Some of those roles very, 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 very provocative. So, like I said, I think sometimes modern women, um, it can be hard for them to transition, and some of them aren't really able to. And I wonder, if you're not really able to, if you still really want to do these same things or kind of act in the same way you did when you were single as when you're married, is that going to be able to sustain a long marriage? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So for those who are on, please get those likes up. Hey, what's going on, RM? Also, tag anybody on this discussion who you think may find it interesting. We're just talking a little bit about just the whole situation with Devon Franklin and Meagan Good. As y'all know, there is a lot being said about that. And I think, y'all, at the end of the day, I said this before, while I'm definitely a big supporter of celibacy, that does not mean it's automatically going to fix every single inherent problem. If you choose to be celibate for a few months, but you have an entire history or decades of, acting like a 304 or acting like a party girl, those mindsets, those memories, those desires, you know what I mean? That different behavior, the appetite maybe that you even that you built up sexually, as far as attention getting from guys, validation from other men, that doesn't just go away. That does not just go away. So, okay, I want to see it because I think I'm gonna see if I can pull this other thing up real quick. Yeah, I see. Yeah, so I see can't be done. That's what I'm saying. It's hard, and I think it's dangerous for women to think that you can kind of just do both and it's going to be easy transition. Being a wife, that's hard enough. That requires a certain level of work. But now, when it comes to respecting your, trying to respect your husband, and then especially somebody like him that has he's a pastor, so he has a certain image. It shouldn't even be about image. It should be about really living real. But to a certain extent, he has a certain reputation, image he does want to actually portray and maintain. So anything that she does or doesn't do is a reflection of him, for better or for worse. So like I said, she decided to do that Amazon series. He praised her for it. Again, to me, I find that curious because that series is definitely promoting ideology or behavior that many that is not aligned with is not aligned with things biblically. So it's interesting to me that I guess he really, really promoted that, and specifically her role. But anyways, as a wife, what you do is going to be reflective. It's going to reflect on your husband, for better or for worse. So what I'm saying, when the modern girl mindset, the whole 3 or 4 to being a good old church girl, can it happen? I think women, people really can change. I think if they're genuine with God, I do believe that. But I am leery. I'm just leery of anything that looks too perfect, y'all. Anything that looks too glitz and glam, because that's not real life. That's not real life. You said, can I explain? Can I explain what I mean by modern woman is when I say modern woman, I speak specifically to certain ideologies that women maybe within the past few decades have been sold. Ideologies that I find are harmful. Many of them come from feminism. Many of them come from the media, things like that. But certain ideologies is like around sexual liberation, for example, that you can act and should act just like a man, that you should compete with a man sexually and do everything that they do and act the way they act. That is damaging because men and women are different. Obviously women get pregnant. Like, there's a lot of different things that I think some of us have been told. For example, like women being able to focus on the career and not having to really worry about or think about marriage. And then when time is right, they can get married and then just have kids. And the issue with that is that, women are on a different time clock. It's not to say that you can't have a career. It's not to say that you can't, live your life, but you can't act like there's not, that you're going to have the exact same experience as a man, because you're not. Men can reproduce pretty much until they leave this earth. Women have a much shorter window. So those are the kind of things where we're basically told that we can do everything that a man can do the exact same way that they can, and we just honestly cannot. And here's the cold part about it. Believe it or not, it's like Devon Franklin, they could divorce and move on, and he could marry a 20-year-old, somebody half his age, and be fine, and still find somebody that maybe shares his values, maybe is from the church, like grew up in the church, and be fine. Unfortunately for women, it's not as easy for us when we hit a certain age. Believe it or not, it's not to say that you can't. You have the Jeannie Mai, right, who was able to marry a high value man. She's more of a rarity, right? But in most instances, when we start to hit a certain age, it's not to say that you can't find love. You absolutely can, but you maybe can't demand what you could have when you were in your 20s. And that is, like I said, that's the tough thing sometimes about women and men, that we're just not the same when it comes to many things, including in the dating market. We're not treated the same. So yeah, so like I said, I don't know, there's a lot to wonder about this entire story. There's a lot of holes, there's a lot that we don't know. It sounds really cute and flowery, but we obviously know just from the outside looking in that something happened that was off, unfortunately. But I will say this, and I will wrap this up. Again, celibacy is not the only answer, is not the only thanks, shout out to Harrison Family Vlogs. I appreciate you for the super chat, much appreciated. But like I said, I'm gonna say this again. So celibacy is not the cure all for all issues. They were celibate, they made this whole book, y'all. I think there's this whole campaign around it, different churches, different things, different ministries talking about that, and here they are 9 years later getting a divorce. So the wait obviously was not the immediate answer. They even talked about, they prayed to God. She got, God showed her a dream or gave her a word. Then he eventually got a word. They felt the electricity. They felt the goosebumps. God's in this. But unfortunately, 9 years later, they're still getting a divorce. And so here's the thing. Not everything that glitters is gold. We know this. But more importantly, celibacy is not the cure-all. Celibacy is good. I am a promoter on that for different reasons. I've spoken on this in detail in other videos. You can check them out. I think there's definitely benefits to it, but there's more work you got to do. And like I said, especially somebody perhaps with her background and maybe even his background. I don't fully know about his background as far as his relationships, but she was out there. She was known to be out there. So that stuff don't necessarily just go away just because you celibate for some time. You got to do some work. On top of that, and this is something I ask you ladies too, knowing if you're single and you're where you're at or whatever, and you want to be married, especially if you want to be married to a man of God, are you okay? Are you okay being in a situation where you're not getting that validation from men that previously you were getting? Are you okay not putting yourself out there? Are you okay maybe not getting those likes? Maybe not dressing in such a way that's going to inspire the thirst. You know what I mean? Maybe you're not putting out the thirst traps anymore. Because that's what I'm saying. Like once you're married with a man, you're now reflecting him. And there's no need for you to need validation from other men like that. There's no need for you to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be having all these dudes fawning all over you. Maybe you're not going to be the center of attention when it comes to that. Can you deal with that? And there's women out there who may find that really difficult. Are you also okay if maybe you get in a place where you have kids, your career can't be number one. Your husband is now your husband. You and your marriage, it's God, and then your marriage. That comes before your career. Are you okay with that? Are you okay? And see, and that's the thing about it, because that's actually what it's going to require. And I think so often we can kind of see these stories and they look cute and it's like, oh, wow, she did her thing. And then now she married a man of God and they just look so cute. But understanding that there is real work associated with the path that she chose, right? If if they chose to, marry her and she had all that background, there's different stuff they had to work through. And God only knows what it was that decided to have them break up. But here we are, it's broken up. So, that's what I'm saying. It's just wait. That is not the only thing. And then also, like I said, y'all, it does make me sad. It does make me sad that we see we see a lot of, Christians out here doing the exact same thing that non-Christians are doing. That makes me sad. And I would say ultimately that's not God's heart. People make mistakes and not everybody is perfect. So I can understand that. But there are standards. There are standards that God has for his people. And if we don't live up to them, then like I said, we individually get to answer to God for that. But we can't say, "Oh, God told me to do this," and it goes against what we it goes against who he is. Like I said, that's not how it works. You said, yeah, I know people over here also are side eye Russell Wilson and Ciara. I mean, I hope the best for them. That's all I can say. I'm not gonna put nothing on it because I can only speculate. She or he lets her do whatever, and that's on him. I could say me personally, my relationship with my husband, there's certain things he wouldn't allow me to do. I wouldn't even want to do it anyways. See, and that's the thing too. Like men of God who are really about it, they're not even really trying to have women who are out there trying to be thoughty thoughts. That's not really what they're looking for. So sometimes when I see you see situations where the woman is so out there and she's supposedly with this man of God, I'm like, something ain't right. Either dude is like really, really, really passive and has zero boundaries, or behind closed doors, he's a different person. But there ain't no way you're gonna have this really, really, really crazy, crazy, crazy man of God who, while he is crazy in love with God and serving God, chooses a thought that who has no fear of God. That just makes no sense. So like I said, either dude got manipulated or is super super passive, or behind closed doors there's a different story. But anyways, it's sad. I hope the best for them. I really do. I hope eventually, I don't know. Maybe the full story will come out because, like we said, y'all, there's some holes. There are some real holes in that story, for real. But anyways, I mean, what do y'all think? What are your thoughts on it? I'm seeing some comments come through. I said, I don't care the circumstances. I'm not letting my wife twerk topless online. No, period. Period. Are you kidding me? Like I don't even understand, y'all. Like I seen that and I was like, I don't even know. I don't understand. That's all I'm gonna say. Like I don't understand. No, well, and here's another thing too. I made this point earlier where it's like, at what point are we transitioning from trying to be the young, cute, hot thing to now? Okay, I'm about trying to raise up the next generation to actually be women, to be wives, um to be mothers. Because if you're about it, if you're God fearing, then that is something that you're thinking about. This passage I talk about, older women coming along younger women and teaching them the way, teaching them how to be submissive to their husbands, teaching them how to be honorable, teaching them how to raise kids and raise up generations. There's passages that speak to that. So it's like, at what point does a woman recognize, okay, my role now is to now turn back to younger generations and help prepare them versus me trying to compete with them? And unfortunately, I think that's been lost. But y'all, that's just my opinion. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on it. But I think we're at about an hour. I want to thank all of y'all who have sent in some super chats, some love. Again, if you have not already checked it out, definitely check out the collab I did with Chantel Simone. And let me see. Okay, so I have like maybe 15 minutes. If anybody wants to call it, I'm gonna drop the link because I'd like to hear some of y'all thoughts on this. I think that would be interesting to see. What do you think? I've shared my position, right, as married woman, somebody who very much tries to live as a woman of God, and I've shared my position. But I mean, what do you think? The optics of it to me are just kind of like, there's so many different holes. There's so many different things that are like not seeming right. But yeah, so I put my link there if anybody wants to hop on and share what they think about this whole situation. Um, I mean, oh yeah, here's another thing, y'all. Too, they say that nobody's at fault. So it's like, okay, so the statement they released, they said they have an eternal love that they share. they prayed about it and they're going to be forever connected and nobody's at fault. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that doesn't make any sense because nothing about your statement shows that there is literally any tension, that there would be any reason for you to divorce. So how is nobody at fault? Y'all have shared eternal love. You prayed about it. You're grateful for your connection together, but you're still getting a divorce. So you understand. So that's what we know. We know that there are some big holes out there, y'all. Somebody ain't telling the truth. We may or may not find out. It is what it is. But the bigger picture is, y'all, we can't. That's what I'm saying. Don't get caught up in the gimmicky Christian stuff. Don't do that, because if you start focusing on how things just look on the outward, you will quickly get disappointed. And that's one thing that I've learned about, my walk with God. I can't get so focused on other people, and just because somebody calls himself a pastor or a leader or a deaconess, that don't mean nothing, because people are people make mistakes, and some people out there are just charlatans. So you will get your heart broken if you look at a person who calls themselves Christian or godly, and you see them fall, because it happens. And so it's really important that you develop your relationship with God individually if that's what you're about, because people mess up. So hi there.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually glad I found you. I actually found you from Chantel.
Oh,
I was
awesome.
over there. Great YouTuber.
Awesome.
And so it's so funny. It's like everyone's talking about this, which is great. I was just
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Harrison's family vlog, and he was talking about it as well. But so a question that just came to my mind, and I typed it in the chat. But I wanted to know: do you feel that? Well, two questions. First of all, I am married. Been married for 11 plus years,
Awesome.
and I do talk about and try to give somewhat of a blueprint of marriage on my channel. So I do try to, like you said, have the older people go back and try to give some of an idea of what it is to be married. Try to provide steps, because a lot of us did not grow up in knowing what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a husband. So I do try to talk about that on my channel. So just to say that, because I know you said about, older ones going back and trying to help.
Right.
So with that said, I wanted to know, do you feel that he didn't vet her carefully enough?
That's a really good question, because it's like, we only know what we see. We only know what we see. So it's like, based upon everything they described, it seemed like it was perfect. That's what I'm saying. We know that it's not, because it's like, well, you're here. So obviously there's some fill in the blanks. So one can only speculate. I mean, she had mentioned that she was like, oh, that's my husband. So one can speculate, is like, okay, did she kind of come on him super thick, super strong? And he kind of fell for it, you know what I mean? Because she probably has, not to say he doesn't have experience, but maybe she had a lot more experience and knew how to be influential. Maybe it's that. Maybe they really did hear from God, but somewhere along the line, maybe they lost touch, because I'm sure, as you've known, being married 11 years, like, it's a consistent thing. It's not just like, oh, you're married and then now it's all over. That's when the work begins. Right. So maybe they did. And it just, they lost track, lost connection, whatever. Or maybe, they got in there and she wasn't willing to submit, or maybe he cheated. Like I said, there's so much we don't know. There's a lot of speculation. So that's why it's like, I try not to get too deep into the speculation and say, oh, it's because she did this, it's because he did that, because we don't know. What we do know, looking at the evidence, is that some ain't right. There's a whole bunch of missing details there. He's the one that filed for the divorce. So it's like, okay.
Wow.
For at least from what I understand, I heard that he's the one that filed. Now they have a joint statement that looks all flowery and cute, but at the end of the day, they say that they're not able to stay together. And as a pastor, specifically one who is a pastor, who is a Christian pastor, and very much understands that he in that position, more than anyone, would probably be anti-divorce, it's extremely curious that would be the route that he would take when he knows how that could have potentially impact his image. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot that we don't know to the story. There's, you know what I mean? It's just so
But at the same time, we have to remember, okay, at the same time, the man is the one who chooses the wife, right? They are the
Yeah,
one
yeah.
who says, okay, we're going to get married, in the sense of, you know, they're proposing and such forth. So in doing so, yes, both have to be vetting each other, but
Of
he's
course.
the one that is coming from a standpoint of more out there of, I am a Christian, I am a pastor, so I need to make sure I uphold a certain image, as
Right,
opposed to
right.
her, she's an actress, right? She does not have that, I don't want to say pressure, but she does not have that title she has to uphold. So for
But
her,
oh,
I'm looking at it more so of, he did not vet her enough, for one, and for two, I I kind of feel, and this is also a question, I kind of feel like he was hoping for her to change in some ways. But do you feel that?
yeah, that's and that's the thing, because it's like vetting. Well, you made the point where it's like, okay, well, he's a pastor, but she doesn't have that, and it's like, no, well, and that's just it. I think when you marry a man, you come under his covering. Right now, some people may not agree with that, but it's like, whether or not, like, you marry a man, especially from, if you look from the biblical perspective, you marry a man, you're coming under his covering. So he's a
Hmm.
pastor. You by default are working with him. You by default are kind of taking on that mantle with him. So even
Hmm.
if she wasn't about that life before, you now married a pastor. That's your responsibility to work with him, to partner with him to a certain extent. Not to say you
Right,
just, you can't do other things, but that, so this whole, I marry him, but I'm still way far over there doing my thing. I have zero responsibility to the church where my husband is a pastor. That is
right,
out of order. And again, I don't know if that is the case for
right,
them, but like I said, that's where it's like one can only speculate. But if
right,
the person goes in with that mindset,
right.
that could already be a big issue.
But if I have to, I would say, if I had to use this as a case of, for anyone, who's looking to get married, this is where vetting is so important.
I agree.
Because this is where vetting is so important, because
I
I
agree.
do feel that he did not take into enough consideration that the lifestyle that she built as being an actress, and for the fact that she's been single for so long.
Mm,
That's a lot. And she is living in a city that, I mean, it's
right.
LA, New York, or
Literally.
Atlanta. So those are a lot of, I don't want to say red flags, but those are a lot of things that, as a man of his caliber that's looking to get married, I don't feel he put those things too much as a consideration.
Right.
I really don't. So I would say, for men who are trying to vet, don't go into a situation with a woman thinking that I'm going to help her change to form the way I want her to be. There are
Nah.
red flags there that you see ahead of time that you need to look out for, and say that she's a nice girl, she's lovely, but not for me.
Oh yeah,
So,
and definitely red flags, those exist beforehand. Now we know, and that's the thing about it. There's the image that they present, and then there's the reality of what's happening behind closed doors. For all we know, everything from the Amazon role to, she did an interview not too long ago where she talked about how she wasn't sure about kids for a good probably 6-7 years out of the marriage.
wow.
There's been different things. So he's always been supportive on the outward, and that could be him trying to present a united front. Even right now, they're divorced, they have a
Right.
united front. But like I said, behind closed doors, one can only speculate. That could have been it. It could have not been it. But I imagine, as a man of God, period. Of course, you're going to want a woman who shares your values, who
Right.
is not going out there acting in a way that would still be reflective of her being a single person. You know what I mean? Taking roles
Right.
that kind of, as a man of God, specifically someone who's in a leadership role. Um, that weighs on you. And, you know, there's even different scriptures that speak to this, where it's like, if you're a pastor and you can't even maintain your own home, then how can you expect to try to
Exactly.
maintain the body of Christ? Like,
Right.
it's pretty clear. So that's what I'm saying. Leaders, they are held to a higher standard.
Right.
And that's not to say that, you know, nobody's perfect. Leaders make mistakes too. So it's
Right.
not like, oh, you know, they're horrible, but it's like, yeah, if you are in this kind of position, when this kind of clout, there is a level of responsibility with that. And so that's why, you know, it is, I think that's partially why there's so many different holes. My
Right.
personal opinion is because whether it's him or her, it might be more him. Because my thought is like, okay, let's say he cheated, she probably would have been open about that. She wouldn't be about covering his image. Him seems to me that he's more about covering his image. Again, this is just speculation, just from what I'm observing. So
Right.
for whatever reason, especially if he was the one that initiated the divorce, which I think is the case, he wants to kind of keep things clean, keep a clean record. I'm sure that's a part of his image. I'm like, hey, I can get it, but like I said, behind closed doors, we can only speculate, and it'll be curious to know if more stuff comes out over time.
Right.
But I mean, we've already seen, like I said, with that recent Amazon series, it's like, well, did you pray about that? I don't. All right, like I said, you're gonna have to answer. You're gonna have to answer before God in that one, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Right. And I don't know the series you're talking about. I'm just going
Mhm.
based off, you know, just them parting ways, and there hasn't been anything to come out of, like you said, infidelity. We don't know, or for all we know, he's, you know, doing something more treacherous behind the scenes, and we don't know.
Oh
But
yeah,
you know,
everything.
right. But I think also the last thing I would say, the lesson in this is also, if we're just going off of face value for what we do know, we have to make sure that going into a marriage, we are, first of all, not trying to change anyone. Second of all, marriage is more than just how I feel today. You're making me feel happy today, so I love you more today. I'm going to
Oh
stay
yeah.
married to you. It's a duty. And Harrison Family Vlog, we were just talking about things like this. It's not about, okay, well, I'm in a happy mood today, so I feel proud to be your husband, or I feel proud to be your wife. It's putting in the work even when you don't feel like putting in the work. So something like this, I'm looking at both of them and I'm like, well, how much did you guys really believe in marriage? Especially him. I'm putting a lot more, if you can hear it, I'm really putting a lot more onus on
Of
him.
course, because he's the man, he's the pastor, the lead. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
understand.
Yes, I am. And not to say that she doesn't hold any. I don't want anyone to get that at all. She
Oh,
does.
she definitely is responsible.
She
Yeah.
definitely does. I feel that her not being more considerate to submit to the fact that she now has a husband. So maybe her taking those roles is not important anymore. You know,
Yeah.
the way she presenting herself, you know, I do remember at one point in time she had a certain dress on at a award show, and I was just like baffled, like, why would you think that was okay to come out the house like that, you know? But so there is onus on her. I don't want people to feel that I'm not keeping her accountable, but there all is a lot more, I would say, from face value for what we know, I will put on him. So with that said, the lesson is making sure we're vetting, as men, vet these women carefully. There are red flags. You just have to be strong enough to say, she's a nice girl, but just not for me. You know? And marriages work no matter how you put it. So I just feel like maybe he didn't really know too much about how much marriage is valued to him, as opposed to maybe her, or both. So, you know, that's what I wanted to add to that. And I think the conversation is a great conversation that you're having.
Thanks. Well, no, I definitely appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye. So yeah, she said, y'all, there's always red flags. There's a lot of fear mongering out there today about marriages going south, and we have seen plenty of those. I'm sure many of us know of those. If we haven't, some of us have maybe even experienced it ourselves. So, there's a lot there. Yet there's also beautiful marriages. There are also marriages that still stay together, that have a great relationship. I say personally, one of the reasons I don't flaunt, try not to flaunt my husband online or do different things like that, is just because it's like, we want our relationship to be real. And, we've talked about this not too long ago where it's like, okay, maybe I'll have him come on at a time if it makes sense, if it makes more sense to do so. If I get to a position where it's like, yeah, you have to come on. But until then, it's like, no, I think maybe it's better to do things behind closed doors, having those intimate moments to actually be intimate. Because, unfortunately now, when you are in a public platform, you're in a public space and you're the public couple, everyone's looking up to you. It's like there's all that pressure. And who knows? I mean, the pressure could have been one of the things that really weighed on them, because you had everybody every single moment looking at what she was doing, looking at what he was doing, looking at the way she dressed, presented herself, the roles that she said, the interviews. And that's a whole lot of pressure to put in a marriage. And so, like I said, we can really only speculate at this point. We only know what they presented. We know everything from start to finish looked flowery, but unfortunately it didn't end flowery. So there's a lot to this case that we may not ever understand. But like I said, I will say again that waiting, the whole celibacy, they promoted that book. That does not necessarily mean that your life, that marriage is gonna be perfect. You do that stuff, but you ain't dealt with your internal, right? You haven't actually gone through the process spiritually, purification. You haven't really dealt with your emotions, the emotional baggage, the soul ties, the appetite that sometimes you actually gain from having multiple sexual experiences. You bring all that stuff into the marriage, it can cause issues. On top of that, like I said, if you are a modern woman, maybe a really career driven woman that's been single for a really long time, have a super successful career, you've been with so many different guys in and out of bed. You're taking now all that experience into your marriage. Now you're trying to be dedicated to one man, especially trying to be dedicated to a man of God who has a certain way he wants to do things, who wants to maybe cover you, provide some authority, provide some guidance, provide a level of discipline, provide boundaries. Some women craft under that kind of stuff. They just can't handle it. Again, I don't know if that's the case here. One can only speculate, but that's just the reality. You are a woman, you're coming under your husband's covering. That's not necessary. That is not a bad thing, especially if you choose the right man. But like I said, if you on this thing, kind of independent mode, and you still trying to be independent minded even after marriage, that can cause issues. That can cause issues. And while I don't know if that is their situation, um, what we do know is, unfortunately now they're broken up. Now they're broken up. And like I said, there's a lot to be speculated about that. So, anyways, I appreciate for all y'all for joining. Also, special shout out to any of y'all who sent in the super chat. I see Marco Polo on the super chat. I see Meagan Good's playing that role in the movie cost her marriage. She embarrassed him with that eating role. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about it, because that role, everyone was bent out of shape on that role, and he over there congratulating her. So that's why I'm like, okay, are you for real for congratulating her, or do you just really want it? Is it more important that you keep a united front? And for some people, it is important to keep a united front on the outward, even if things behind closed doors are toxic. So like I said, we'll never fully know unless it comes out. But anyways, thank all of y'all for joining, and we will talk later. Peace out.